manipulating are getting insane. Like some of the drone technologies, they can fly together in like unison and like formations and stuff, and it's getting to the point now where it's you can have them build stuff.
Yeah,
I
just think it's like it's so.
It can be used either way though.
We have to get away from like some of that bogus thinking. Like still mentioning UFOs is something that still divides the room, but it doesn't divide the room the way you think it would. It's between people going like, no, not at all, or it's people going like, yeah, I think it's possible, but I don't think it's possible that they interact.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think a lot of people entertain the idea like, what if, just hold on a second, what if it's possible that they're so intelligent that they know not to just interfere, that they're just not that stupid that they would try to interfere with our dealings down here. One, because we're dangerous, and two, because that would change our level of development. It's just like the story we talked about with the butterfly and the kid opening up the chrysalis. They're not that stupid. They're not, it's not Mars attacks. They're not going to extend the hand like that. It just doesn't, I don't hear a lot of people entertaining that idea, but yeah.
An interesting like thought that I had recently was, have you heard of Voyager? Like, so they sent out this satellite just going in one direction that they said it was like the most plausible direction to find planets that'd be similar to, you know, to hospitable to life, basically. Mm-hmm. And they just pointed it in a given direction and they started sending it in that direction. Voyager has a lot of what is considered to be some of the cultures from Earth and stuff too. Mm-hmm. So
there's a lot. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of planets that occupy the Goldilocks zone. There's a lot of planets that have the same conditions for life that we have. That's assuming that life can advance using only what we have.
Yeah. What if other? Right? That was my question. Was like even before us, like it, like basically that was our like historical cultural like footprint that we sent out, right? And oh man, this is gonna ring just like that's the worst.
That's cool. But no, looking at like when we think about this kind of stuff, we go like, all right, well, we've never seen that before. But then I think like throughout the human history, there are things that we have done personally that have never come to light to us that are fascinating. Learning about how technology worked, those things that Archimedes produced back in the day, they had vending machines like 2,500 years ago. You know,
well, that computer they found in Greece, right? Like off the coast. That shit's insane.
They had the steam engine. If the steam engine, like this thing it never was fully accepted and integrated and kept consistent with the development of different civilizations. But Archimedes and Heron developed they developed the steam engine. Yeah. So it's a ball filled with water that has two pistons on either side. So like this, and when it heats up, the pressure builds and then it begins to rotate and you're moving. I don't know, like don't quote me on this, 1,500 RPM or something. Yeah. Like that's a shitload for back then, right?
Yeah.
So like we get the idea like they're just banging rocks together.
Yeah.
They had fully automated, and this is just on his channel, and I think that's a joke of a channel, but it still came to light.
There's a bunch of these archaeological sites that are being found now. Like there's Pumapunku, there's Göbekli Tepe. That's if you've been watching Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock stuff, they've been kind of delving into that.
Yeah, they talk a lot about that. So
there's other sites around the world too, like the fact that in Egypt they found various new pyramids after like infrared scans.
They found a lot of pyramids.
Yeah,
and you don't hear about them in the Ukraine. Like that's just. It's weird and kind of discouraging when almost nobody talks about it, but that's
the one in Svetospol.
Southern tip.
Yeah, and
3 of them found.
There's a lot of theories as well. It's a boggling thing that you have cultures that are totally different in different parts of different parts of the planet, and they have these similar types of burial sarcophaguses and all this stuff. So how is there?
I think.
Yeah, I know finding a plural for certain things is retarded, but yeah, no, we watched this movie Voyage of the Mimi back in like elementary school or something. It was Ben Affleck as a kid. It was so weird. It was when he was like growing up, and he's like, "Hey, my name's Ben, and I'm doing the Voyage of the Mimi." I couldn't remember actual dialogue, but it's like they go to like the Mayan pyramids and certain sites. There's like Site U and stuff. It's just talking about archaeological digs and stuff. Now Stonehenge, they're saying that they're gonna do like digs around Stonehenge for the first time now, saying that Stonehenge is just one portion of like a much larger
Yeah.
installation.
Yeah, I was reading the other day that they actually discovered, miners discovered the remains of a city underneath Missouri. I'm not sure how credible that report was, but there's so many sites like all over America, North America too.
Yeah.
Randall Carlson talks a lot about just like the shifting climate and how that permitted life to thrive in different areas. And,
Yeah.
like I know that it's inspired people now to look at areas that proved hospitable, but people haven't discovered very much in terms of life there. And so now you're moving in that direction. But back to the point I was making, we barely understand what we've done. You know, something goes on the other side of the world and we don't hear about it. Therefore, it is non-existent to us. You know, Randall Carlson also talks about the idea that like if the Earth had no biosphere, we look like the moon. That's how many times an asteroid is hit, right?
Mm-hmm.
But none of us know this. None of us, like barely anybody understands that that's the case. So to us, it's just non-existent. So I think if we're ever to see something like a drone or something from another civilization crash land somewhere,
yeah,
you know, none of us, if any of us did recognize what was going on, how many people of us would believe it? How many, like the information just doesn't spread. And the thing that really bugs me though is when there's something that actually is decent, and you do find decent stuff buried in people that make these hokey videos on UFOs or their personal findings as individuals. I think it does have merit. You don't necessarily need a PhD to have something of value, but they always use the worst songs and the worst graphics and just like
for editing,
just that totally. I know that like 90% of the people that look at it will just go like, this guy's a kook right off the bat.
Yeah.
And then they write it off.
No, definitely.
I don't know why that's the trend, but I think
it's the fact that there isn't a lot of money for them to usually work with.
Granted, but I mean, like you don't need money necessarily. You just
now you don't. Right?
No,
like,
now you don't.
Like
but
now
you also have
really
videos. Like people still do this now. When shit goes crazy, like this thing with Winnipeg, this UFO crash landing supposedly into Lake Winnipeg. Military shows up saying say it's an exercise. Could very well be that's the case, or it could be the other. I'm not sure. But even that video had a really like hokey intro. You know, graphic letters moving around the planet, and music. You know, epic sounding music.
Yeah.
It's just
maybe they think it's
granted. No, they absolutely could be that passionate about it, but you have to understand, just extend your thinking out to other people that they're gonna think it's hokey, that like this is trumped up BS, right?
Yeah.
You know, like if you want to come at it, I personally feel that maybe a better way to present it is just use simple text, you know, black screen, white text, just no music, something going for legitimacy.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, I've mentioned that to a lot of people. The idea of using like shitty cinematography for stuff, it's usually employed for people that have short attention spans, have like trouble actually paying attention to a given subject matter. So you use like hokey pokey like sound effects and changes in lighting and stuff.
Yeah.
It's shitty soap operas. My parents always watch like Indian soaps too. It's the same thing too.
Yeah.
So it's like if you use these kind of methods, you look at The Office. That's a comedy that didn't use like a laugh track.
Mm-hmm.
It was hilarious.
Yeah.
You didn't have to tell people when to laugh.
We were just thinking about that the other day. Do you remember that line? I don't know how much you watched of it, but he's talking about how much he hates Toby. And he's like, if I was sitting in a room with Saddam Hussein, Hitler, and Toby, and I had a gun, I'd shoot Toby twice.
Yeah.
That's got to be the funniest line of that whole show. But you're right. When you look at something like John Oliver Tonight, that's a really informative. It's a really informative show. It's fantastic, and it does follow that format. It's like
speaking of Jon Stewart's gone now.
Yeah, I heard about that.
So that's a pretty big deal. He was on the air for a long time, and he made some crazy points. There's points in the polls of the states when he was the most reputable news source in the states. Jon Stewart.
I don't doubt that.
So that's people heard that a lot of people were going to him, but the fact that he was actually considered the least biased.
Yeah. When
he clearly shows his bias too, but that shows you how much the majority of these media outlets are just bullshit, right?
Well, the thing was, like, a lot of his stuff was satire, and a lot of the way he was, his character was blatant, sort of like Stephen Colbert.
Yeah.
He's playing a part.
Yeah.
He's playing the part, and he does it really well. Granted, it's seamless sometimes, but it's not like
people don't know
CBC.
that. People actually don't know that
some
he's
people,
playing
yeah,
a role.
they don't know.
Yeah, they got pissed off like at the fact that
Yeah,
like,
but I gotta think that those were the same guys that got pissed off when they found out wrestling. Yes.
What?
No,
No, I'm just
but
kidding.
the dude, when you go and look at like CBC, I was just talking about that. You know, there's no mention. It's really subtle. The HSBC story that came up on the BBC in a little ticker tape.
Yeah.
That when the bank pulled some like massive shit like that.
Yeah.
Just the ticker tape. That's it. Commercial.
No, we've seen the fact that media covers what they want to, right? It's but it was an interesting thing when Abby Martin from RT, she's Russian television news. They have like a headquarters in the States, but it's owned by a corporation that's from Russia. So people are like, don't listen to RT News because they're super biased.
I got called a communist because I told somebody I liked RT News.
Yeah. So say stuff like that. So Abby Martin had a retort. She's like, here's the thing. This is not going to be super reliable news when you're referring to news about the Kremlin, about Russia. But our news about everything else is actually pretty dead on. Right?
Yeah, she's pretty cool like that.
Well, when she said that, when she said that, it made me think the fact that, you know, none of these corporations in North America will ever say that there's massive amounts of bias, but the amount of bias that there actually is so heavy that it's just assumed that it's there too.
And it's like it's weird to see how much how much honesty is worth as that indefinable currency, because Rob Ford, like a mayor who does crap. Granted, he didn't admit it immediately, but when he came out and said it, I think people were so goddamn relieved to hear somebody finally admit to something that was cool.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty insane to hear any politician actually come clean about something. Like
I did not have sex.
Let me tell you about one of the darkest stories I've heard about recently. This just tells you how far the filth goes and where we can go from here. I mean, that's the setup I want to take it as. Yeah. It's just like, here's the bottom of the bottom, and we're not going to dip below that. We have nowhere to go but up. There was a politician down in the U.S. I can't remember exactly which state, Florida maybe. There's a bunch of little counties in Florida, obviously too. But he actually molested 2 young girls, and he was working to hire a hitman so that they would never make it to trial. He got caught doing that, so now he's 25 years to life, I believe. You can't just like the depth of evil that beyond evil.
There's one article here that I saw recently. I'm gonna try to pull it up. 28 years. I think I'm not sure this one already. So there's a judge that was sentenced to 28 years in prison because he's a Pennsylvania judge, and he was doing something that was basically considered kids for cats.
Yeah, and he got covered on Joe Rogan's story. Was he not with? I believe it wasn't Shane Smith. No.
I don't know, and sorry, I just skipped over
No, I
that.
remember that. Yeah, no, his he was also covered in a documentary by Michael Moore not too long ago, and it was Capitalism Love Story.
Yeah, with this guy. All right.
So prisons have become, and like you can look, there are 9 major industries now, and a few more that benefit tremendously from having privatized prisons, and some of which are juvenile detention centers. And so one of the judges had been paid off, and obviously you get more kickbacks. You can buy a bigger yacht if you send more kids to juvie. So kids would stand up. They'd have ridiculously minor offenses, things like they threw a steak at their stepfather and had an argument or something, or you know, wrote a joke about a teacher in class, and then they go up in front of this judge, and it's unbelievable. He's just like, you're going to juvie, you know, and they're not being monitored. It's not being regulated to see if they've served their time, as if any time was necessary at all. They would overstay their time there. And this guy also had a name for his yacht too. Something just like a slap in the face for the victims.
Yeah, it was I can't.
Floating justice or some bullshit.
How do they make money out of the duties?
So you make it's a privatized prison system, right? So just per prisoner that comes in, you actually get an allotment of money from the state, right?
From the state, yeah.
Because you're taking care of the tasks that they would otherwise handle. So some of the taxpayer dollars that would otherwise go to them gets, and you can see this happening too through. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm nothing. I was just agreeing with you. Yeah, it's crazy.
But and you can also see this with I think companies like Halliburton during the Iraq War. So they were also privatized weapons manufacturers, logistics companies, things like
Contractors.
that. Contractors, yeah. And there's more contractors, more civilian personnel on the ground than there were troops or boots on the ground in terms of soldiers.
Yeah.
And they might like, I don't know how expensive a truck might be. You know, $750,000 truck, you know, then they have a flat tire, and then they just burn the whole truck and get a new one, and that's covered. That's totally covered, and they take the rest of it as a write-off. And like it was obscene what was happening over there. They would trash, like they have burn pits where they get the new gear, and any defect whatsoever. Sometimes I don't believe there was even a defect. They torch it all, and they get new stuff.
Yeah,
and that's covered. It's all covered.
The amount of money that they spend on jets, on these fighter jets that are like, you know, in different phases of development or developed by the United States exclusively, it's like billions.
Yeah.
And then they're like, okay, if you wanted to calculate that into going into citizens' pockets rather than like coming out, and it's the figures are insane. Just because
I don't get how they even be able to do that.
Because
I think because at that level, when you're dealing with companies or like military, private industry, a lot of these industries favor psychopathic thinking, and I think you'll see a concentration of that kind of mentality at the tops of these. You know, they're exceptionally charming. They have incredibly high aspirations and goals for themselves. And obviously, the offshoot is they have no empathy. Empathy is not a part of it. And so you can see that reflected in the standards imposed upon their employees and so on. You move up, like you look at Goldman Sachs, one of the guys that got in, he said, literally it was like being initiated into a Jesuit priesthood. You know, the ritual that goes on and this sort of mentality, theirs was literally, it's not enough that others, it's not enough that I should succeed, it's that others should fail at my expense, essentially.
Yeah.
So like you gotta see that when you have profit as a mechanism, you'll see that inevitably, I think, coming into it. Because all that we're ever seeing going on in society is painted by human thought. And all of that is dictated by our imaginations, all of us as individuals. You look at, like, it's easy to divorce it and say, like, oh, the economy is like a separate entity, you know, sciences as a discipline is a separate entity. They're all aspects of the human being. That's how whole we actually are. And we're still pulling so much out of ourselves, but it's all still painted by our psychology. And that's why I'm interested in this. And psychology, I think now is a really limited term, because I think really when we start to look at it, it's going to explode into really the science of the self and see into what that actually means. And I think that has huge ramifications, but just to recognize that it all comes back to us when you look at systems out in the world. And by understanding yourself, and I think the people that actually make a really beneficial difference are the people that actually take time to work on themselves, you know, to check themselves, to check the ego. What am I doing? You know, I'm stunned by watching. Sometimes I'll see a politician, or I'll see there's a guy on what's his name, Dragon's Den.
Kevin O'Leary.
Yeah.
Dude, I get amazed by him too.
Shocked.
Yeah,
absolutely shocked.
His views on certain things do reflect the way that you would expect him to be based on his, you know, business ethic and whatnot.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's Shark's Den, all these kind of like Dragon's Den, like Shark something else, Shark Tank and all that stuff, right? So it's like just basically showing that these guys are like sharks.
Yeah.
They're like dragons. They're beasts,
right?
He
came off when he went like it's great that like people live in poverty.
It's completely profit-based thinking, right? It's not gonna be humane. It's not gonna be
granted. But personally, this is just me, and I'm sure you can call me a bleeding heart liberal or whatever you want to call me.
Yeah.
But it's, first of all, I think it's really good to address, because we're starting out of this podcast and in every other creative endeavor that we're part of as young people. I think it's easy for people to write us off and be like, these guys are idiots, you know, they don't know what they're doing, you know, they're shoddy, whatever we got going on here. You know, we look like fools, right? But come on, we're learning. This is how it begins.
Yeah.
It's easy for people to forget, like, we started that way. If you're an employee of the company, you look at the new guy, that guy's an idiot, right?
Yeah.
You don't necessarily think that way, but like it's too easy to have the disconnect. But looking at that kind of thinking, it's just, part of me does feel bad because I think I know that we're all guilty in some sense or another of thinking or feeling that way when we're under a lot of stress, or when we have this mentality of scarcity. When we don't feel like we have enough, we can become a parasitic. Each one of us has that capacity.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and sometimes we do it subtly and we can easily justify it and say like, well, if I mess some guy's day up, then he's going to be a stronger person as a result. You know, like we'll always find a way to move past that because it's too hard to accept that maybe we're a dick sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, but like, I gotta be honest. Yeah. And maybe pity's the wrong word, but I do get a sense of that when I think about what's ultimately going on behind those eyes of Kevin O'Leary. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kevin O'Leary, sorry.
Well, what is it again? His name?
Kevin O'Leary?
Yeah. No, it's I mean, we've seen examples that are similar cases to him in the past too, right? Where people are just like really cold-heartedly capitalistic people. But it goes back to the same conversation of the crazy bankers that have all of these crazy amounts of assets. When they have deaths that are, you know, resulting from, you know, these like you were talking about, even what was it, that organization that was the contractor we were just talking about,
Halliburton.
Halliburton, right? So when you have these kind of organizations that are profiteer, like they're war profiting, right? Yeah. They're kind of throwing ethics like straight out of the window, right?
Totally.
So that's something that we've seen many times. So it's the most prominent, and the people, like figures within the business, you know, field in general, are the most, like, you know, the bloodthirsty ones, right? The ones that go for the kill, the ones that go for, you know, going after small businesses to absorb them and stuff. So it's the system has to be changed for like how people profit, right? And it kind of is changing now because of different types of currencies that are rising. You have, like, with alternate currencies, with cryptocurrencies and stuff, as the power gets taken away from these banks and privatized banks and stuff, that might actually empower us to be able to do something.
I think you're right about that. We're seeing a crazy amount of examples now of seeing, like, I've heard that recently McDonald's and Monsanto are hemorrhaging money because educated consumers are becoming educated now. Yeah. They don't want to buy that shit. Yeah. And I know that Monsanto also developed a plan in conjunction with the federal government to try and impose pressures on countries that don't want GMOs. They're trying to impose that now because, and to me, that shows you it's not like they're not trying to give you a spoon with food on it to try and, you know, you gotta eat this. Yeah, right. They're making a real nasty effort of it. But like, for me, when it looks complicated, it's always good for me at least to look at it like just to level the playing field and look at all the human beings playing, you know. And if, like, I think most people are really, really nice, honest people. They're not the ones posting all the crazy bullshit videos you see. You know, they try to do the right thing all the time. And then I think some people, if they're not necessarily psychopathic, they're just really ambitious people. They're on this planet. They feel that they're gonna make something of themselves. And too right, I feel that way too. Yeah. And I think that's a good way to be, because you can be really expressive that way, but also that has a negative aspect in that they want to go too far. Yeah. And they are the ones that push all the buttons. They're the ones saying like, all right, well, look, they're pulling this stuff, so let's start the Manhattan Project. I'll be the charismatic dude and I'll get everybody together. I'll do this. I'll organize, I don't know, the Kennedy assassination. I'll be the guy behind that. You know, we'll work it out. These people that actually step up, most people don't want a part of that. They just want to live in peace and harmony and go about their day and make a life for themselves. You know, they're not interested in being a part of that.
Especially not part of conflict, right?
No, exactly. Like, it's a really unpleasant state to be in, you know, dancing on the needle. But then you got people in politics, and you got to show like House of Cards, right? And that's how it's portrayed to us, right? But some people are kind of like that.
Yeah.
I don't watch it, but apparently third season came on. Apparently got leaked on Netflix for 3 hours or something like that.
Yeah.
Which is a big deal, apparently. But yeah, and then you have other people that feel, as a result, reluctant, but feel all at the same time it's their duty to step up and prevent this. You know, some people that find themselves in these positions, because a lot of good people do decide, like, well, listen, I don't like the idea of a war, but apparently it has to happen. You know, like, if I don't go, maybe somebody's gonna, maybe they'll kill me or my family later on. So I guess I have to go. Yeah, sure. There are some douchebags that are gung ho and they love the idea of a gun, and they don't really seem to come back with too much PTSD. But then there are good people too, and they wind up getting higher up on the chain, and they wind up getting smart. They get wise to it, and if they try to talk about it pretty loud, then eventually it comes out, and you'll see like the good in people shine.
Yeah. No, it's as long as we keep spreading information at the rate that we are, it's inevitable that people are just getting informed more.
That's what we can do at home, is shake ourselves out of this comfort zone that we're all in. It's way too easy. It's way too easy for us, and we got jobs, we got all this kind of shit going on. It's way too easy for us to say, like, whatever, it's not my problem, I'm gonna fill up them all, eat McDonald's and forget about it all. Not my problem. Like, for us at home, I think it's so important to shake yourself out of it. And it's so seductive. We talked about this last time we all hung out. You know, the idea of like the scariest prison being the one that's seductive, the one that you would choose.
But it's good that we're slowly getting into different types of meditation you got into float tanks recently, right? So that's something I want to start doing more often now too. Jordan was saying that we can come through and float sometime. So
I was thinking about that, like, worst comes to worst, could you not use, I don't know, a bunch of Epsom salts and a sleep mask in your bathroom?
In your bathtub?
In a bathtub?
No, people have done that. And there's like people.
The only thing you got to do is regulate the heat of the water.
Probably need a sleep mask. Just turn off the lights.
Turn off the lights, and people
get a lot of salt on it, Epsom salts.
And then people actually they put ketamine. They'll take like intravenous, like people have died like that a lot.
It's John C. Lilly stuff.
John C. Lilly and Terrence McKenna and those guys, they would actually take intravenous while floating. Right? So that's I haven't really wanted to fuck with ketamine too much, just because it kind of I've seen so many kids at concerts K-holing and stuff.
So it sounds scary. More, I think
it's a psychedelic though. Right?
Granted, it's a psychedelic, like everything. The one misconception, I'm going to be giving a presentation at my school pretty soon on
alternative practices.
Well, the therapeutic applications of psychotropic drugs. And the main point I want to show is, like, where do you draw the line between drugs, as we commonly think of them, and medicine? Like, where do you draw that line? And it's all about the intention of the application, right? So with anything, like, you can get messed up on a doctor prescribed morphine or whatever. You can do that.
And a lot of people do.
A lot of people do. OxyContin Express. No, like, how many people down in Florida were taking medications? Like 1 in 3, 1 in 6?
It was, well, I mean, Florida's population is also like an interesting pool to take from because.
Right.
Right. So.
That was that Billy Corbin podcast.
And that was an interesting podcast.
That's weird too, because just before he popped up on the list, I was watching Cocaine Cowboys.
You watched it?
Yeah.
No, that's Joe's definitely a major advocate for that documentary. There's a few that are pretty good that just showed what the states. I watched one recently that was about Bill Clinton and how he allowed for so much cocaine into the country.
Well, he even said, he's like, make sure you pick up a bag for my brother. He's got a nose like a vacuum cleaner. Came out of his mouth. Okay, Rhodes Scholar.
Probably came out of his nose too.
Dude, keep it. Like, I used to work for a guy doing landscaping. Amazing guy, really well informed. He's read the book The Creature from Jekyll Island, which is all about how the Federal Reserve in the U.S. was incepted by wealthy interest, private interest in the early 1900s, maybe it was late 1800s. Back when they were only using trains as mainly transport, trains and horses. And they get together on an island and they convene and they discuss how they're going to run a privately owned bank that has the impression of being a federally run system, as the Federal Reserve. It's not federal, it's not reserve. Really, really insane, insidious system. Like one politician, one congressperson was, I believe, quoted as saying, "We know more about what goes on the surface of the moon than we do that goes on behind the doors of the Federal Reserve.
Mm-hmm.
So like you got that kind of thing going on, but back to what was the point you were making?
Something about you were talking about psychotropic.
Yeah, we were talking about that. But
kind of going back a little bit.
Yeah, no, the point I wanted to make is like you can use it to destroy yourself, or you can make yourself better.
Yeah.
And I just want to really get away from those because I think like we're seeing now in Canada, we're seeing elections starting to ramp up, and so attack ads, all that BS is coming out more. Like this idea about how marijuana affects the brain and that it causes psychosis in people.
Yeah.
Like 1 in 6 people using marijuana, they don't even specify. They didn't operationally define, I believe, in the experiment they were doing. I think they poorly chose the candidates as well.
Well, I think it was conducted. That study was conducted on rats, I believe, right?
Yeah,
and it was like
they did a study on rats, but they also did a study on people. But they didn't define whether they were using high potency or whether they were just using like untreated marijuanas. Like a lot of things were not operationally defined.
Yeah.
It was not a well done
study
at all.
Yeah, a lot of them aren't conducted properly, and you see that they're not even conclusive results too. So
they're not conclusive, but as long as they vaguely suggest that there's a like, and this is something that you can't do in a correlative experiment, in correlation research, you can't tell what causes what. So if you're identifying two factors and how they influence one another, if it's a correlative study, you really don't. You can't say that this causes this because by the same token, you can say, well, maybe this causes this.
Yeah.
You simply can't do that.
Yeah.
And this is one of the methods of research that they were trying to do to show this point, which sort of suggests to me, and I don't know because I haven't seen it, that you have either government or private interests who are very strongly against the idea, very conservative, that don't like the idea, and they fund the operation. They're like, all right, just do your best to, whatever, just make it happen. Make it happen.
Yeah.
Here's a pilot bill.
Somebody was saying to me recently that marijuana, as far as why they've kept it, they've kept prohibition against it for so long, is that they actually have something just in case. It is like a cash crop. They know it's a cash crop. They've seen it in different models all over the world. They've seen how much it can boost an economy and stuff. So somebody was saying that the United States recognizes that the way that they gamble with their cash, with their trades all over the world, that they have to cover their bets somehow, right? They have to hedge their bets somehow. So how do they do that? They have these little stupid things that they don't necessarily allow through. But when they do allow, like, people are so shocked by Colorado and Washington's numbers coming back. You have crime rates going down.
The money's going back to the people.
The money's going literally back to the people from the taxes and stuff. Either in like it's going towards education, it's going towards like actual not towards police enforcement, which is one thing that people are insisting on a lot of the counties and stuff. But it's wicked. It's it's something that the United States needs right now, is some type of cash crop that works in a similar way. So it's great that it's coming out now. The question then comes that why has it been so stringently fought against for so long, right? So
I just have a thought just now, and maybe this isn't a really enjoyable thought for some people, but just to thinking about this, just imagine though, you still have marijuana heavily criminalized in say an urban area, and this is an area that's plagued still by things like crack, cocaine, and heroin. Now, because marijuana is a Schedule I drug, it's not permitted in this area. Obviously, neither is crack for that matter, but it's nevertheless supply and demand. What would you rather have? This young kid grow up and inevitably be pulled into either the trade of crack, cocaine, or heroin, or using the product, or would you rather that perhaps he uses marijuana instead? Trying to imagine the alternatives.
I mean, it comes down to the fact that people should have the sovereign right to do whatever they want to themselves. Right? Like once you get to a certain age, right?
Absolutely, getting to a certain age. I think once it's clearly regulated, like a lot of what was said about things like psychotropics, it's like or psychedelics, it's like a car. You're not going to let a 10-year-old drive a car.
Exactly.
We're not going to be idiots about this kind of thing. But in areas where, for instance, like things are out of control. I don't know. Let's use Liberia as an example. That's like way out there, where some shit is really bad. There's still a lot of them are using all kinds of drugs, but if people that I'm sure have smoked marijuana will tell you, like, it's not a gateway in the way people think.
Yeah, the biggest way that it ends up being a gateway is that if you go to somebody who is your drug dealer in the black market, they're gonna say, "Hey, if you like this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
do you want to try this other stuff?"
Yeah.
So because it is actually allowed into the black market because it hasn't been decriminalized and legalized for so long, that is why it is a gateway drug at the moment, because the conversation arises about other drugs when you're going and dealing with shady individuals. Whereas if you regulate it, like, federally, now Alaska just got their laws passed.
Yeah.
So now they have it decriminalized over there, and they have recreational sales and stuff too. But it's the fight. A lot of people ask me, they're like, what's the fight going to be after? Once you have legalization, what's your fight going to be following that? And I was like, okay, well, you look at cigarettes, right? Why are cigarettes bad for you? The tobacco itself, tobacco has been used by a lot of cultures for ages. It's not the tobacco so much that's bad for you. It's the chemicals they add into it so that it burns, right? And I'm like, if they're going to start mass producing joints, like pre-rolled joints in packs, which is they've already started doing, why wouldn't they add chemicals to make them burn more efficient and clean, right?
Yeah.
So then the struggle at that point is going to be to keep it clean.
Yeah.
Right? So
I think it's
there's always a struggle, right?
Absolutely, but you can see it's really, really impressive. Like, I'm personally really proud to see a lot of people determine what the markets produce. Like, to go out now and to see what's being offered in stores in terms of organic produce, and not just like.
Well, we have a huge organic market.
We have a tremendous, absolutely, and it's crazy to see that, like, we've influenced that. It's not marketers going like, I wonder if they'll like this.
No,
they're
people
directly responding to
markets.
people. Yeah, directly responding to people.
People are aware.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you can see that happening, and I think that'll happen here. Because personally, I do have a lot of faith in humanity. Just in that respect. When people have what they need, we make the right choices.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that seems to be the way that the direction that we have to keep going in, is just allow for people to have the basics, the necessities. That's kind of the thing that we've changed as a culture now. Is in previous cultures, every single culture or government or whatever body you have around the world they'd strive, post essentially the Baghdad like civilization change, right? You had people would go out and try to find, or try to make their people like the best, right? Train the best or make them the smartest people.
Yeah.
Nowadays, the idea of living like the normal life is you be a pawn. You go through the public school system, which isn't meant to like necessarily breed exceptional people. It's meant to be like,
it's totally curtailed in a lot of cases.
A lot of people are going towards private schooling now, and homeschooling for that reason, because the education teachers that is very important job, right?
Absolutely it is. And we talk about having, it's a problem now that we have a lot of influx of teachers, but it's all about how you manage the resources. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I bumped into a person she used to be the receptionist at my high school, actually, and she's now since moved to another school where they practice something called distributive learning. So that's where it's really recognized that the teacher is not so much of an authority as they are a facilitator of learning. So they guide the students to teach themselves. So they spend a little bit of time, a couple hours each day. I think it's only 4 days a week. And they give the student the material. They tell them how to do it, why they grade it like this, what's this doing for you, what's this doing for me. And this is how you go about doing it. Now it's on you to take the initiative to go about doing it, right? And it's heavily, like, parents have to be involved as well. So this is why it's, at the moment, it's more geared towards people who have time to spend with their kids. Not everybody does, obviously, but you can obviously see why that's a far superior model. Because we know that, like, I've read a lot about how Noam Chomsky grew up. How he obviously, a lot of his work is fascinating to me. So looking back, he went to actually an experimental school, what was considered experimental at the time, and they practiced something similar. It was a lot of emphasis on students themselves taking the initiative in the learning process. And right now we're covering this in teaching English as a second language. One of the best things you can do is to help find what intrinsically, what motivates a student from within to learn, because that all determines how far you're going to go and how well you're going to do in the class. You can't just force the information on the kids. Like, granted, there are some models that work because
They're
that's what the area
uniform,
designated
right?
for sure.
Yeah,
Like, you look at China, they have a really heavy traditional model in terms of teaching English, but that's because it's better for them to have a really large number of people have very basic rote understandings of a language, which is like grammar translation. So I show you this sequence and you copy it in that format. It's not like let's engage in a role play and use the language so we actually interactively understand how it functions and what it looks like as a whole. It's more grammar translation. So it's better for them. It's more economically feasible to have a large number of people have rote understanding than it is to have a really, really small amount of people not know anything.
Yeah. No, that makes sense, and that's the unfortunate way of things that we kind of like.
I butchered that last part. It makes more sense than having that last, the really small amount of people know English really well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the most cost efficient / like the most like uniform way of doing things, right? And that's kind of like, and it's funny how we look always at the big scale of things.
Yeah.
We're like, okay, how can we get people out through this education system on a big scale, right? Like, you know, we need to get as many people out, but then we fail to actually give attention to this education system. There's a lot of shit within it. The fact that there's so much, you know, bullying that still happens, and that's still a problem. And then it's shifted to cyberbullying now, which is a different type of bullying.
Like, you ever go back and watch those old shows, like not necessarily Arthur, but I mean like older cartoons and stuff, and the way they portray bullies, and movies too. It's sort of like, yeah, it's just typical. That's high school for you. You know, that kind of attitude. When you know, if you've ever been involved in that kind of shit,
how harmful it is to your character.
Just poisonous.
Yeah.
And yeah, granted, some kids are tough, but man, for me personally, like I've always been, yeah, no shit. I'm really sensitive. That's who I am. I can't help that.
Yeah.
And so even really innocuous things got to me. So you can imagine how it affected me when you know, people went out of the way to mess with me on a daily basis.
Yeah.
You know, and that's like psychologically damaging beyond belief. Like, granted, I'm really glad with who I've become as a result. You had to be strong with that, but I have to wonder, like, what could I have been if I hadn't dedicated so much time to trying to balance myself and pick myself up if I already had the confidence instilled in me to begin with?
It's like a subtle balance that you have to keep, though, because if you don't have that part of your, like,
keep you humble and keep you in check, right?
Well, that, and like if you don't have the social interaction that's involved in high school, and actually, you know, certain parts of that struggle actually do mold your character. So then people end up asking the question of, you know, how much is necessary for growth and how much is overboard. I think that inevitably now what's going to end up happening is over time you're going to have the classroom is going to become more interactive.
Yeah.
And it's already happening all around the world.
Yeah.
There's MIT that has put up their materials.
That's what's really cool. Like,
so
back when before Pirate Bay got messed with, and you can still access this in any other way. For instance, at UC Berkeley, and I was listening to a podcast. Sorry, not a podcast. It was a whole video series on the psychology of leadership from Harvard.
Yeah.
So, and it's like an hour each time. There's 16 videos, I think. But amazing information you get for free. And so many universities offer this because I think there are still a lot of university professors that do see it progressively, and they do understand that this knowledge that they're teaching to the students that they pay for, that can pay for it. It's really important to get it out there.
It's like that's again another thing that we came back to is that you can't stifle the communication and information transfer, right? So that's why we got to keep going.
Looking at
I think we're about like a pretty good time. We can end the podcast at this point.
Just one thing before we do that. It's just about the idea of what's necessary in terms of adversity for your development to become a really healthy, well-rounded person. And one thing I come back to is just like how powerful our imaginations are as opposed to the reality. We're constantly being let down by TVs and movies and sometimes books by the fact that they never quite measure up to what we imagine that they might be. And for that reason, when you look at our ability to abstract, somehow integrate that into your learning process as a young person, and to use your imagination to who's to say you can't use your imagination to develop circumstances and overcome those and you know, without violence and bloodshed. Because I think as a human race, like we're gonna have these parts built into us, but it doesn't necessarily mean that like we should designate bullies in schools in the future.
Yeah.
I think we can use our imaginations to overcome that. Because I mean, one weird example is I had not too long ago a lucid dream where before I went to bed I was like, I want to learn how to handle confrontation because this is a big deal for me.
Yeah.
I don't like the idea of it running my life. So in the dream, literally, I met with a friend of mine, and the weird thing, he knew that he was an aspect, like a projection in my imagination, but he was wearing like the face of a friend of mine, and he's just sort of tongue in cheek with that sort of message.
Yeah.
And he's like, all right, so first of all, we're gonna handle verbal confrontations, you know, and once you're comfortable dealing with that, then we're gonna have a physical confrontation. Is that cool?
Yeah.
And that's how the dream for 4 or 5 hours went.
That's interesting.
And I mean, that just shows you. But yeah, no, I think
This is good. Yeah, just having the new setup is just more convenient now. It's actually like kind of allocates the whole conversation setup. So we're gonna keep it going and keep more of these coming. Do you want to say the goodbye? Oh,
yeah, sure. Thanks again, guys, for tuning in. I know it's probably been a pretty long time. I'm not gonna apologize because we're all busy. Whatever. Thank you. I hope you guys are enjoying what is a pretty beautiful start to the spring or end of the winter, depending on how you look at it. In the meantime, just keep active, keep informed, and take care of yourselves.
Yep. Thank you very much, everyone.